Emerald Lake State Park.
Last September, I traveled to Vermont and camped at Emerald Lake State Park. I loved the campground, at least my campsite, which was in an area without a lot of campers, so I had a lot of privacy and solitude. No utility hookups, so I had to use a generator, but in September in Vermont, I really didn't need my air conditioner. I don't know what exactly the temperatures were, but I did need to wear a sweatshirt a lot. But that's the kind of weather I love. Gus and I hiked down the mountain to Emerald Lake, which did actually look emerald green from certain angles. However, it's close to a main road, so you can hear some traffic.
Can we just sit down for a second, Gus? Can we? Gus, I need a break.
As it turns out, Emerald Lake State Park is not too far away from White Rocks National Recreation Area. So Gus and I took a trip there to do some hiking and explore the area. It looked like there were some nice boondocking spots, and I was kind of annoyed that I wasn't even aware of this recreation area until I already made reservations at Emerald Lake. But I figured at least at the campground I have access to potable water and a dump station. It also turns out that Emerald Lake State Park is not too far from where my father's family used to live before they all passed away. I decided I was going to do a drive-by just to see what the old farm looks like. But the farm was at the end of a dead-end road, so basically I was going to end up in someone's driveway. And I didn't want to bother the property owner or possibly get a gun pulled on me. Although I did meet the property owners about 10 years prior when my father and I traveled to Vermont to see my Aunt Cyl when she was in the hospital. My aunt's best friend's son and his family were the new property owners. They got the property from my Aunt Cyl, who used to live there. And they even allowed my father and I to visit their home. But that was 10 years ago, and people move all the time, so I really didn't know who currently owned the property. The closer I got to my destination, the more familiar everything became. As a kid, I spent many summers at my Nana and Grampy's farm. I remember the mountains, the cows, the old barns that look even older now. As I approached the farm, I was nervous about how the current property owners might react when I show up. So I came up with a plan. If no one was outside, I was just going to turn around and leave. If anyone was outside, I would introduce myself to the property owner and say that my grandparents used to live there, and for old time's sake, I just wanted to stop by and see what the old farm looked like, although I really didn't know what was going to happen. So fortunately, it was the same property owners. As soon as I pulled into the driveway, the husband came out of the house, and so I got out of my motorhome and I said, "Oh, hi, my grandparents used to live here." And he said, "Oh, are you Cyl's niece?" Apparently he remembered me. Could you imagine you live at the end of a dead-end road and then you look out your window and some lady in a motorhome pulls into your driveway? So I was relieved that he remembered me. We talked for a while about the haunted history of the house, and I reminisced about my childhood experiences. He talked a little bit about the work that he had done on the house so far. Apparently, they had to demolish the barn that was across from the house because it was already collapsing. It was so old. It became a hazardous condition on their property, so they had to get rid of it. After about 10 minutes or so, his wife came out of the house. I could only imagine what she must have been thinking. And so the husband said to her, "Oh, this is Cyl's niece." And she said, "Oh, yeah, I remember you." Even though I'd only met them once, they both seemed happy to see me. I think because I reminded them of Cyl, they helped take care of my Aunt Cyl towards the end of her life. It's funny because I was wearing these crescent moon earrings that belonged to my mother. She passed away. And they both noticed my earrings and said, "Oh yeah, you're Cyl's niece, all right," because my Aunt Cyl was really into astrology and stuff like that. So then their son came home and there was no place for him to park because I was pretty much taking up the entire driveway. So I decided that it was time that I leave. And then the husband said, "Since you're Cyl's niece, I feel like I want to give you a hug." So he gave me a hug. And then his wife said, "I'm not really a huggy person, but for some reason, I feel like I want to hug you." So we hugged, and then I turned around and got into my motorhome. And then I looked up and I saw the woman staring at me. She looked literally dumbfounded. And she said, "That's really strange." And I said, "What?" And she said, "The connection that I feel." And I said, "Well, it's probably the Cyl connection." And then I just drove off while this woman stared at me like she was looking at a ghost. And as I was driving away, I thought, is it possible that the spirit of my Aunt Cyl was channeling through me in that moment? I'm glad that I overcame my anxiety about the situation and decided to see my grandparents' old farm. It brought back a lot of fond childhood memories, and I really believe that the spirit of my Aunt Cyl was there, just showing up to say hello.